So we take 2 steps beyond that. The first step is to take the simple idea of gap analysis and apply it not for the big issue of claim rep performance, but for each of the tasks that end up in that performance model. Okay? So instead of saying claim reps will follow the claims process, try to go out into the field and understand where are the places where they tend not to follow the claims process. Because the claims process itself, you can talk about a process in infinite depth. 17 first steps, underneath each 17 steps, 7 sub-steps. Okay, so what's really going wrong? So maybe it's that there's a couple of areas in red where they're not following the claims process. Identifying appropriate payouts, there may be some areas in red where based on what we see in the field, appropriate performance isn't happening. The idea behind that's quite simple, right? Which is if appropriate performance is happening for the other 13 steps in the claims process, we don't really need a training solution on it because we're not fixing a problem. Right? We only need to fix the mistakes that are happening in the field. Even when you do this, however, you get a very specific behavioral list of things out. Let me help reps not fail to violate coverage. Let me help reps categorize incidents, much smaller scope, still a long list. And try to rank order them from the ones that will have the highest impact to the ones that will have the lowest impact. So now we've converted from follow claims process, identify appropriate payouts to biggest problem we have is that the reps are escalating to litigation too soon. Second biggest problem is that they're miscategorizing incidents. Third biggest problem is that they're not doing a sufficient review of the customer's history before they're going forward and trying to make a determination. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Found that's a much better list to go off of when creating programs. What that tends to look like, this one has numbers. Sometimes they're often, in fact, most typically they're just done qualitatively. And this is a different domain. This is a retail domain. Tends to look like this, though. List of mistakes on the left-hand side. We try to evaluate the impact of those mistakes. I'll come back to how we do that quickly. And some summary of the total value of those mistakes if we're able to tackle it on the right-hand side. So we end up with a list of, we call these critical mistakes, this process critical mistake analysis. The key in the middle is, first key is go out to the field and see what's actually happening that's a gap at a very behavioral level. Second key is come back and prioritize. Do that by looking at how often does it happen, some sense of how much does it cost when it occurs. There's a little bit of magic in that. And a sense of, hey, we the training guys, is this something we can fix? Because as you know, a lot of training programs get created to fix problems that aren't training problems. They're compensation problems, or incentive problems, or recruitment problems, or whatever it is. And throwing training at those things is going to be expensive for not a lot of return. So we go through those, we call them value drivers, rank order. And what we find is that begins to lend itself to a conversation that's more like this. So this is the kind of thing which is pulling the business stakeholder over to our side of the fence a little bit. But what we can say is, we set this out. We thought this was going to be a 2-hour e-learning course. We thought this was going to be a 2-week face-to-face event. Right? Didn't really know. We said we validated for you. We've gone out into the field. We've understood that we can cover this stuff in an hour. Do you want us to go forward with a 2-hour course? We found that we can cover this stuff. It would take us 3 weeks to cover this. If you want us to stick with 2 weeks, we can only cover that much. Do you want us to cover that? And so it's a way of operationalizing the scope conversation with business stakeholders at a level which we could say, look, our promise to you will be, we will get those business objectives because we're choosing the highest impact mistakes, which we're going to hit really hard. And, and that's what we're going to do with this course. And it's a way of making it very transparent of how we're making the transition between your objective, our goal for the instructional design guys. I'm going to push ahead. Any questions on that before we go ahead? Now, I will make one more comment actually before I push ahead, which is a lot of the core concepts between this, on the surface, this framework and that thing from Tom Helgard seem quite different. Different formats and different data in them. Underneath, there's a lot of the same ideas. Okay? So A, get some very specific data that's easy to look at. B, try to put it in a framework that you can judge context. Right? Here we can judge context against each other. In Tom's case, it was context against a hypothetical spend. And C, use that data not to take decisions which you then bring forward as decisions made, but use that data to have a conversation with the stakeholders. Okay. Blended components. Mark Rosenberg, I just was on a talk with Mark Rosenberg on blended learning. Did anybody else in that talk? Okay, no, okay, only one in the Mark Rosenberg talk. Okay, so again, I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail about this. I think the opportunity of blended learning is something which has gotten a very pleasing amount of press over the past few years. And it used to be that we talked about moving formal training to online, then we talked about performance support system and job aids. Now we talk about learning 2.0, right? And what's happening is that every year, sort of the number of arrows in our quiver goes up and up and up and up, right? Which is great. Nothing ever goes away, and then our decision set becomes broader. And yet, and the most buzz is about the thing that was sort of brought to the fore in the past year, which means it's the least proven thing. Maybe we've tried it in an organization. More likely, we've heard about it from somebody else. And so, the most common thing that I saw when I did my review of advice for handling the tough economy for a training organization was move to informal learning, for example. Now, some of you may already have informal learning programs working in your organization, ready to roll. Others of you may think, interesting idea. We should put a toe in the water. Others may think, you know what, I'm not an early adopter. I'll wait on that. I'll borrow from somebody else. But probably not for most of us the thing which is actually going to turn the needle this year. We have to get ready so we maybe use it if it proves out for us in future years. Okay. So, I went around again looking for models. And here was a place where I actually felt great envy when I looked at another field. Which is, if I look at what the HMOs are doing in medicine with evidence-based medicine, the idea is that HMOs are trying to keep okay quality while being fairly ruthless about driving down cost. Okay, so that means that your general practitioner hasn't gotten a raise in 20 years, for one thing. But it also means that part of what they're doing is to try to figure out when do expensive treatments make a difference compared to less expensive treatments in a fairly rigorous way. And so most of the major HMOs have fairly wonky data analysis centers who pursue this day in and day out. And that's an area where I think there's actually some pretty fabulous data. Again, lots of controversy over it, but fabulous data that shows when generics work, when you don't have to come to the doctor, when minimally invasive surgery works, on and on and on and on. Now, as I thought about the data that goes on behind that compared to the data we have in organizations about how well different kinds of learning solutions work, that's where I got the envy. I think if we were to say, I see Instructional Designer 1 is telling me that they're going to really use a wiki as a core knowledge transfer mechanism, and then they're going to use web-based scenarios as a follow-up mechanism. But over here, this person's telling me, for what looks to me to be the same kind of content, that they're really going to have first a classroom kickoff experience where you get some practice, and then manager mentoring as you go back. Two very different models for this. Which one works better? Professional judgment at this point. Not a lot of data out there in the field. That turns, I think, to be a very dangerous point for us as we come into a time when we're being asked to look at our budgets. Because the great temptation is to say, you know what, that Learning 2.0 stuff, which I'm a big believer, I think it's a little immature, but I'm a big believer in it, that Learning 2.0 stuff is going to be great for me. I am going to put my bets on that because I could tomorrow tell you how I'll take 20% of my cost out. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take the load of the programs I have and I'm going to put them on other people's shoulders. Okay? So that leadership program, what we'll do is we're going to go out and we're going to give some of our people rapid e-learning tools. They're going to provide some content for us. I'm going to put it on my LMS, and then I'm going to hook them up with their managers to do manager-led training. And you know what? I can sell that in the organization, and all the cost of that program shows up zero for me. Right? I have to buy 10 copies of Articulate. So there's a great temptation there. On the other hand, like I said, I actually think these ideas have value. But the thing you have to, I think, be careful about is how do we make the decisions about when and where to push on this?